Welcome to Secret Story. It was a little after 8 a.m. on a Saturday in early October. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my house in Fayetteville, North Carolina, outside of Fort Bragg. I just arrived back from my latest deployment 2 hours ago. I was supposed to be away for 8 months, but I am back a month early. It happened quickly. Yesterday, I received a promotion and was immediately transferred to my new unit. I was rotated home a whole month early. It was so quick, I didn't have time to tell my wife. I caught an overnight flight, arriving back in Fayetteville early today. I decided on the flight over I would surprise my wife and crawl into bed with her this morning. I spoke to her on Skype yesterday but didn't know when we talked about the promotion and last-minute transfer. She still thinks I am in Kuwait and won't be home for another month. Everything seemed normal when we spoke, so I was excited to surprise her. Once released in the morning, my friend Charles gave me a lift home. When we turned the corner onto our street and pulled up to the house, I saw a strange car in our driveway. "Hey man, whose car is that? Did Shelly get a new one?" I knew we hadn't gotten a new car, especially not a Mercedes, and I had no idea whose car it was. I instantly had a sinking feeling, and my gut tightened up. "I don't know, man, it's not our car, that's for sure. Pull on down a ways, so they can't hear your truck." We stopped 3 houses down. Charles grabbed my arm as I started to get out. "Ed, do you want me to stick around?" "No, I'll be fine." I slipped out and went back to get my gear. Charles walked around to me. "Look, man, please don't do anything stupid. It's not worth it. Promise me." "No, Charles, I'm not stupid, I won't do anything but scare the hell out of them." I got my gear out of his truck and gave Charles a man hug. "I'll call you later." It was just about 7 a.m. as I walked to the house. I used the hide a key to unlock the side garage door and slide inside as quietly as possible. I put my gear down and reached into my backpack to get my .45 caliber automatic. The clip was empty, as it had to be during travel, so I went into my gun safe and pulled out a full clip. I was still wearing my travel uniform. I walked quietly through the mudroom and into the kitchen. The house was quiet and still quite dark. The sun had not risen yet. I quietly pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and laid the gun down on the placemat, putting the full clip beside it. I sat down and took off my boots. I am sure I looked scary sitting there with a gun that I needed to do a little recon to see what I was up against. I quietly slid down the hall to our bedroom. The door was open, so I looked inside. The light from the bathroom was enough to see. In the bed were Shelly and another woman. They were both fast asleep. The room was a mess. There were clothes all over the floor. They must have been in a frenzy when they got here. The bed looked like there had been a wrestling match. When you are in the 82nd Airborne, you learn to suppress your emotions in times of stress. You also never act until the right time when your opponent is not expecting it, so I decided to wait it out and not do any more looking. In my 9 years in the Airborne, I learned to let things develop at their pace and only act when I have the advantage. I thought about who the other woman was, but I could not see her well and didn't recognize the Mercedes. Since I had been gone, something had happened and certainly did last night. I didn't know what I was dealing with. I quietly backed away and walked back to the kitchen. I sat down, put my boots back on, and settled in, quietly waiting, something I had learned to do very well in the army. I was not working on a plan or any bullshit like that. Based on the evidence, I know what I saw and what I knew had happened, so we will see what happens when Shelly sees me. Her shock and reaction should be amusing, and her partner will completely freak out that I thought about my past 6 years married to Shelly. Each year has been wonderful and is the one thing that made all the deployments easier to take. I knew she was at home waiting for me. We had similar values, and our plan to start our family was after this deployment. Now that I see her with her lady friend, I wonder what the future holds. Shelly and I have been together for almost 9 years and married for 6 years last June. When we married, we knew it would be a hard life with long separations, and it would take a special commitment and intense love for each other to be excellent military spouses. I had agreed that I was in for a career and would do my 20+ years before retiring. Shelly is a talented artist. She has received several commissions recently. She painted 2 large murals on the sides of buildings in Fayetteville, helping the historical rejuvenation of the city. She also does baby and wedding portraits. She makes a good freelance living and has started to post things online, selling some prints of her work. She also works 30 hours a week at a call center for AT&T. That I thought we were happy, though I know it's hard on her with me being away for lengthy periods. Not by choice, which is for sure. As the clock ticked, I messed with them a little. The sun was rising, so it was lighter in the room, just enough to make coffee. I decided to make a pot. The smell would wake them, and we could get the party started. I knew it would create confusion, and that is what I needed, 2 confused women. Then, I could go to work on them. I loaded up the coffee maker and turned it on. Brewing only took a few minutes, and the sweet coffee smell filled the air. As it drifted to the bedroom, I heard movement. I moved my seat to the booth side of the table against the wall, making it harder for them to see me when they came into the kitchen. I heard giggling and rustling down the hall. Then Shelly burst in, flipping on the light. When did you make? Her words stopped. Then, behind her, I didn't. Oh, shit. Came from Eve, her good friend from work. As she slipped into the room, there were 2 ladies. Well, I'm not sure they are ladies, but I will be polite. One is wearing one of my old t-shirts. In shock, they stood beside each other, mouths agape, staring at me in my uniform with a gun on the table. Shelly finally found a few words. Ed, what are you doing here? You are in Kuwaiti. I just sat looking at them, amused at their reaction. Shelly was paralyzed, not knowing what else to say. Eve had a shocked look of fear on her face. I finally said, "Good morning, ladies. I hope you had a wonderful evening together. It looks like you had plenty of toys. I am sure this is not the first time, so how long has this little tryst been going on?" I waited for some reaction, but there was none. They looked at each other, not knowing what to do or say. It smells like the coffee is ready. Shelly, please bring me a cup. Get one for yourself. Eve, please join us, too. Shelly, please get your lover a cup as well. Then come over and sit down, now. They both jumped at my emphatic now and hurried to the coffee maker to fill the cups. Shelly started to talk, was all she got out. That I raised my voice again. Silence, no talking, just get the coffee and get over here. They both knew I was pissed and not fooling around. They hurried over, bringing the 3 cups of coffee, the creamer, and sugar. They sat down. As I watched them, I decided to make them uncomfortable. They looked at me, then at each other, with confusion all over their faces. Shelly started to protest. But I held up my hand. Stop, do not say a thing. Shelly, you have 2 options. 1, do what I tell you to do, or 2, you can pack your shit and get the out of my house. That shocked her, and she gasped, "Oh God. Eve, you only have one choice, do what I tell you to do. Or Monday morning, I will call your HR director and tell her what I found here this morning. As Shelly's manager, you both have violated the ethics code, so I'm sure you will be fired immediately." Eve stood and slipped off her thong. "Give it to me." She handed it to me. I put it to my nose and smelled it, then laid it on the table, and her scent was divine. Shelly was fuming but scared as she pulled the t-shirt off her head. They both stood before me, trying to be modest, but I stopped them. "Put your hands down at your sides." They looked at each other, then did as I said. "Okay, sit down." I watched them scramble into their seats, squirming and cutting their eyes at each other. It was fun seeing them so uncomfortable. I looked at Shelly, not caring about Eve now. I would deal with her later. I love my wife, and even in this awkward situation, I still wanted her and loved her completely. I chose to wait for her to have the courage to ask me. How was I here now? I knew Shelly was confused by my presence. She was happy to see me home but very unhappy at being caught cheating, especially with a woman. It was shocking that she would cheat at all, but even more so with a woman. She had never shown any interest in other women other than just being friends, and there was never anything but girly affection between her and her friends. It did confuse me, but I would get my answers soon. Shelly looked at me and finally spoke, asking the question she was dying to ask. Ed, why are you here? Yesterday, when we talked, you were in Kuwaiti. You are not supposed to be home for another month, yet here you are. Her eyes were sparkling as she spoke that I decided to avoid her question and post an allegation. So Shelly, if I had come home in a month, you would be on base to greet me, kissing and hugging me, is that right? I would have never known about this little affair, so you could continue until I am deployed again, and then you two could be together full time. That seems about right to me. Am I on target, ladies? The look on Shelly's face was sad and confused. She wanted to say something but could not get it out. Tears started to flow, rolling down her cheeks that I waited. Eve spoke. Ed, it's not like that at all. We are not an affair. We are co-workers who went out with a group from work last night and got pretty wasted. We danced a lot. We were both turned on. After her talk with you yesterday, Shelly was available. I am, and I was very so I seduced her. We had never been together before last night and had no plans to do anything again. It just happened in an unfortunate circumstance. Though I will say, I loved every minute with Shelly and would do it again in a minute if I had the chance. I would be after her if she were not married or in a relationship. This is all my fault. I looked at Eve, thinking what she said made sense. What do you have to say, wife? That incensed Shelly, and she hates me to call her wife. But right now, I didn't care how she felt. My God. You are home. Look how I this all up. I should be elated and over the moon happy, but now, neither of us are. But I know you, Ed, you wonder who I am and what happened to my wife, asking yourself, do I even want to be with this woman again? Oh God, I have up so badly. Shelly cried out as her voice trailed off and her head dropped to the table cradled in her arms, and she began to sob loudly. She looked up at me. Oh God, Ed, I love you. I am so sorry. It meant nothing, I don't know. I am so sorry. Please forgive me. She dropped her head back down on her arms and sobbed harder. Eve looked at me with fire in her eyes. I know she wanted me to go to Shelly and comfort her, but no, not yet. Shelly, sit up. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. It is me that you betrayed, and our marriage vows that you have ripped to pieces. Yes, I am looking at you, wondering what I should do. But I have several questions I need you to answer before I make my decision on our future. So, sit up, stop crying, and pay close attention. Your answers will determine what happens next. I wanted Shelly to worry about our future. I wanted her to suffer, and she was. Eve looked at me, ready to kill me for being so hard on her lover. If she knew my intent, she would feel different. When Shelly and I first got serious, we talked about our values and what was important in our lives. I told her that the one thing I could never tolerate in our marriage was infidelity, and if there were any cheating, it would be the end of us. I did not tell her why I was so adamant about that point until much later. My feelings were so strong because I watched my mother cheat on my dad many times throughout their marriage, while he was traveling for work. I saw the many men, and I heard them rutting. I lost all respect for my mom. After my dad passed away, I did not speak to my mom for over 5 years. I never told Shelly why until right before we were married. I needed to forgive my mom so the remainder of my family could all be together for our wedding. Before we were married, I sat with Shelly, telling her the whole story of what had happened between my mom and me. The one good thing was that my dad never knew any of it and went to his grave, thinking my mom was his loving, faithful wife. I had counted over 100 different men she had been with from when I was 7 years old until I left to join the army at 18. I kept my secret to save our family and my dad. He loved her dearly. But seeing my mom as the tramp that she was, I had no feelings for her. That I hoped the story impressed Shelly with how much I hated cheating, and I hoped it would make her think twice about cheating if the opportunity ever came up. Before last night, I didn't believe it had, but as you can see, she failed her first test miserably. Shelly, we have been married for over 6 years now. Do you remember the conversation we had 10 days before we were married? She thought a minute, so I reminded her further. It was the night before I went to talk to my mom for the first time in over 5 years. Then it hit her, oh God, oh God, oh God, yes, oh God, no, no, I never thought about cheating. It just happened, not planned. Oh no, Ed, please, this was a huge mistake, God, I love you, please. She cried out, dropping her head back on her arms on the table and sobbing loudly. Eve was almost panicking, not knowing what was happening. I could see her breathing heavily, and there were tears in her eyes for the first time. Eve knew she was a significant part of what could be the end of our marriage, and she was beginning to feel it. She shivered in her seat, wrapping her arms around her body as tears rolled down her cheeks. She looked at me. I sat stoically. What is happening, Ed? Shelly, what is going on? I said nothing. Shelly raised her head and wiped her cheeks. She looked at Eve and told her the story. Like Ed said, his mom cheated on his dad their entire marriage while he traveled for business. His dad thought his whole life that she was his loving, faithful wife. Ed saw it all and kept it from his dad and the other children. He told me this story 10 days before our wedding, and he wanted his whole family there. The next day, Ed was going to talk to his mom for the first time in over 5 years. Eve sat in shock at the story, now understanding the magnitude of what had happened and what it could mean. Suddenly, she began to cry. She looked at Shelly, then at me. I am so sorry for creating this whole problem. Shelly's cheating would have never happened if I had just been a friend. I am ashamed of myself for causing such a mess. It was my time to step in. So, now that everyone understands my position on cheating. I thought it was also Shelly's position on cheating, but after last night, I guess not. No. Ed, please. She started. I cut her off. Shelly, my second question is. In the past 2,414 days, I have been deployed 1811 nights. Have you ever hugged, or danced with another man or woman in a romantic way? The look on Shelly's face surprised me, and the fact that she had to think about the answer was telling. I waited. Well, I guess silence tells the answer. I pushed back the chair and stood. Shelly began to panic, as did Eve, not knowing what was next. Ed, stop, where are you going? Shelly choked out with a tremble of fear in her voice. I walked from the room, and I heard chattering as I left. I went into the bedroom, closed the door, and locked it. I had to pee. I had been in this uniform for 231 days. Walking into the bathroom, I saw their clothes scattered on the floor. I felt better physically, which helped me clear my head. I walked back into the bedroom and lay back on the bed. I decided what would happen and how I would resolve this mess. That I slipped on a pair of shorts and a tee. I also thought it was time to cover them up, so I found 2 robes for them. That I stayed in the bedroom for another 15 minutes until Shelly came to the door. She knocked. Ed, are you okay? I didn't answer, so Shelly tried the door. It was locked. I heard, God, Eve, he's locked me out. This is bad. I up so bad. It will be okay. Ed loves you, Shelly. Eve tried to ease her concern. They shuffle away. I decided to finish my questions and then have some fun with them. I unlocked the door, took the robes, and walked back into the kitchen. They both scurried back to their seats. They didn't look at me as I got a beer from the fridge and walked back to the table. I changed, so it's time to get dressed. I handed each of them a robe. They both looked at me and timidly said, "Thank you," as I sat down again. "Okay, Shelly, I believe you were stuck on what should be a straightforward answer. Either you have or have not done any of those things or worse since we married, not counting last night. Looking at the bed and the floor, I know you did all those things last night." I sat back. Looking at Shelly, she was extremely nervous, fidgeting, and breathing faster. "Ed, you have thrown a broad net over what you consider cheating. So let me make it clear that, other than last night, I have not had any contact with anyone but you since we have been married. They were all innocent flirtations when I was out with friends or a girls' night out, or a company party while you were deployed." She stated firmly. Before I could respond, she added, "Ed, I love you and always will. I will be devastated if you decide to leave me. Here and now, I will make a firm commitment that nothing like this will ever happen again. Please forgive me for a weak, intoxicated moment." I knew Shelly was sincere. She was devastated now that this was happening. Eve said, "Ed, I must take responsibility for last night again. I have been attracted to Shelly for a long time. She has always been a dedicated wife and never took up my advances until last night. I worked on Shelly, and after all the drinks I knew Shelly was mine. I brought her home, and she cried that she missed you so badly. I comforted her, and one thing led to another, and you saw the results." I looked at her as she finished. It was a good thing it was under the table. "Okay, Shelly, third question. Which one do you want forever?" A look of shock was on both of their faces. I asked the question neither of them ever imagined I would ask. They both looked at each other with strange looks, then looked back at me. Shelly asked, "Ed, what are you asking me?" I smiled, "I am giving you a choice, Eve or me." Shelly's mouth dropped open, and Eve looked shocked. I caught them both off guard. "Ed, I am married to you. I love you. I want you, only you." Eve looked at Shelly and me. My question was something she had never expected. She was shocked and confused, I could see it on her face. Our eyes met as she looked at me, and I smiled, and she blushed and looked away. Shelly saw us looking at each other and started to cry. I watched the two of them, letting this play out a little more. Shelly looked at Eve, then me, as she wiped the tears away. "What is going on, Ed? I am so confused. Do you want me now or not? Okay, let's settle down here. There are two things I want. I want a detailed description of last night. I'd like the two of you to tell me the story. Then I will tell you the second thing I want. But first, I need the two of you to make us some food. I am starved and haven't had home cooking in 7 months." The two of them looked at me. Shelly set her jaw. "No, I am not giving you a detailed blow-by-blow of last night, no way." I stared at Shelly. "Okay then, you can go pack your shit and get out. Maybe your lover will help you and let you stay with her." Shelly's eyes got big as saucers and filled with tears. "Why are you being so mean?" "Me? Being mean? Don't you remember a few hours ago all night? That is called cheating." I looked at Shelly, seeing Eve cringing out the corner of my eye. Things had been going smoothly, but Shelly pulled the trigger when she tried to take control. Now it was time to make things right. "Now get up and cook us some food, then tell me about last night, or the two of you can get the out of here now. Got it?" They looked at each other, stood, and pulled their robes tight. I watched them as they cooked breakfast: eggs, bacon, fried tomatoes, and toast. The food was good. We ate in silence. I was sure Shelly and Eve were thinking about how to tell me about their night together. I was excited to hear them tell their story. And I was sure it would be fascinating. I decided I needed to know a little more about Eve. So, as we finished eating, I said, "Shelly, you clean up while Eve tells me more about herself." They looked at each other, and Shelly started to protest. "No, Ed, why do you need to know more about Eve?" "Shelly, clean up the dishes." That I looked at Eve, who sat nervously, rubbing her hands together. So, Eve, please tell me about you. Are you single, married, have a girlfriend or both, or have a boyfriend? I asked. Eve looked at me, then at Shelly. Eve swallowed hard that I prodded her. Look, it's not a hard question. Eve seemed as though she didn't want to answer. She looked at Shelly again. Eve, look at me and answer the question. I started raising my voice. Eve dropped her head. I am married. Shelly lashed out at Eve. What the are you crying for, Eve? You have nothing to lose here except maybe a friend or lover. I smiled as turmoil began to swirl in the room. Shelly, shut up and finish the dishes. Shelly scowled at me and turned back to the sink. Eve looked up, wiping her tears on her sleeve. She drank coffee and took a deep breath. Finally, she was about to let the world in on her story. Yes, I am married to a man. We have had an open marriage for several years and have grown apart. So much so that we never sleep together anymore. He has practically moved out, and he is living with another woman. He told me last week when he came to get the rest of his things that he wanted a divorce. We have been married for 10 years, and I cannot have children. He wants kids so this woman can give them to him. I can't deprive him of that. I love being with women more now, so I am granting him what he wants. That he is a government contractor and travels for lengthy periods to unknown places, preventing us from talking or from me even knowing where he is for months. Then, magically, he shows back up, sending me a text that he will be home in a few days. It is tough, even worse than your long deployments, because he might be here for 1 month, 3 months, and then go again one day. That we decided that, to be fair, we could see other people for recreation. To be honest, I have been after Shelly for a year. And she has always avoided my advances. She was mine. We left out the back door, so no one saw us and came here. I always have my toys in the boot of my car, so I pulled them out, and we had a hell of a party. So, there you have it, Ed. No affair, no long-term relationship. Eve sank back and looked at Shelly standing against the island, listening with her mouth open. That I was satisfied that was the truth. Eve had no reason to lie, hoping that what she told me would help Shelly. That I was thinking about what I had heard and how I could use this to my advantage to teach Shelly a lesson. I had already decided not to leave her, but she didn't know that. I wanted to play with her a little more before letting her off the hook. I smiled. Shelly, close your mouth. Are you shocked at what Eve has just told us? Shelly looked at me. I was not sure what her expression told me. She swallowed hard. She looked at Eve. You are a lying bitch, were the vehement words that barked out of Shelly's mouth. Boy, Shelly was pissed off. It was a good thing I had my gun, and Shelly couldn't get it, or Eve might be dead. Shelly was that mad that I looked at Eve. Did you tell Shelly you were a lesbian? Eve looked down, then at Shelly, then at me. Yes, I did tell her that. I knew she loved you. That was obvious, and she would never cheat on you with a man, but she might with a woman. That I thought for a minute, then asked Shelly, so? How was it? Tell me what you liked about it. A small smile showed on her lips. She was proud of her conquest, and I am sure she never thought it would lead to this turmoil. That I looked back at Shelly. Come sit back down and tell me. I am sure Eve would like to hear as well. Shelly's eyes were full of fire. She was angry and afraid, and all this talk had her a little turned on. She slowly walked over and sat down. She didn't look at Eve, she looked at me. Well, tell me, was it as good as you hoped? Good enough to throw away our marriage? I drove the nail in hard. Shelly's face changed from defiant to fear. She started to fidget and rubbed her hands together. She was breathing harder now. She didn't know how to start, so I decided to see what Eve thought of Shelly's performance. Well, Shelly, if you're not going to say anything, I will ask Eve. Eve, you're the expert, so how was Shelly as a lesbian lover? Was she a good student? Did she learn a lot? Do you think she will be a good lover to play with in the future? Shelly looked at me with fire in her eyes. She looked at Eve, and Eve looked at me. The visual circle was complete. Then they looked at each other, deciding who would talk. Shelly looked at Eve, then turned to me. Okay, I should tell you. Eve and I have been co-workers and friends for a long time. Recently, she has talked to me more, and I have been open with her about how much I miss you. It was only innocent girl talk, at least on my part. Every month it got harder and harder. But Ed, you were not here, and I had another month before you could do any of those things. Tears ran down her cheeks, and she couldn't look at me. I looked at Eve, and she looked sad, as she listened and looked at Shelly, and I saw a tear welling up in her eyes. Last week, Eve and I went to lunch. I told her how bad I had it, and she held my hand and talked to me, being very comforting. I came home, and later that afternoon, Ed, you and I Skyped. I fingered myself through the call and came hard while you watched me. We had never done that before. Did you jerk off then too? I had to be honest with her. Yes, I came hard watching you. I don't know why we never did that before. Okay, well, I felt better. I called Eve and told her not to come over that night. I was afraid of what would have happened if she did. Over lunch, she told me that she was a lesbian and that she could show me about girl-girl loving, and I would not be cheating with a man, which could solve my problem. I was open to anything, so she said she was coming over. I was so distracted I was not getting much work done. Eve came to me and told me the girls wanted to go out for drinks and dinner, and she thought that after Skype, it would be good for me to go with them. I didn't want to go but decided I would rather be with people than be by myself. After work, I came home, and Eve followed me and sat with me while I dressed for the night. We drank some wine and kidded around. She helped me pick everything I wore last night. Then we went to Eve's, and she wanted me to help her dress. I was listening and looking at both. Eve was fidgeting as Shelly talked. Finally, Shelly took a breath, and Eve jumped in and added more to the story. Part 2 is coming soon.